If YouTube has taught us anything, it's that change is bad. Stop it right now, stop messing everything up. Alright, not all change is bad, and in a game like Team Fortress 2 that has well over 600 updates, it has changed a lot. And only some of the time do they mess everything up. So I thought, what if we look at which weapons have been changed the most since they came out? Not necessarily which weapons have had the most changes, but how much the weapon differs in purpose and functionality from its original version. For better or for worse. Also, I'm gonna be doing this as a one weapon per class kind of thing, cause I like that format, okay? Jeez. So which weapons have been changed the most? Find out right now. Alright, so this is a good one to start with because the Pretty Boy's pocket pistol shares 0 stats in common with its first version. Originally, all of the pocket pistol stats were passive except for the 25% slower firing speed. It increased Scout's health to 140 and made him immune to falling damage, which was a stat that paired pretty well with the original version of the Babyface's blaster since it heavily discouraged jumping. But this also came with the downside that it made you take 50% more fire damage, whether it was active or not. But this version broke a later established rule that every weapon that offers a passive health increase or passive damage resistance needs to be visible at all times. This is what probably led to the rework it got in the gunmetal update, which removed the health bonus, made the fall damage immunity only apply when active, and changed the fire vulnerability to 20% damage vulnerability when active. But what I got in exchange for all these nerfs was 3 whole health per hit, on a weapon that fires slowly and makes you take more damage for holding it. But that was later increased to 5, then eventually increased from 5 to 7 in the Jungle Inferno update, where they decided to rework it again. They removed the fall damage immunity, changed the slower firing speed to a faster one, and added a 25% clip size penalty. The Pretty Boy's pocket pistol went from being the pistol of choice for most people, to just bad, and back to the pistol of choice. But it has essentially nothing in common with its original version, in its stats or even really how it's used. The Liberty Launcher started as a very 2011 weapon, if you know what I mean. Am I right here, folks? I mean, it started as an incredibly bland plus stat minus stat weapon, and not a particularly well balanced one, having just a 40% faster projectile and a 3-shot clip. And at this point, we already had a rocket launcher with faster rockets, and we already had a rocket launcher with 3 shots. The Liberty Launcher at the time was often described as a crutch weapon. You have 3 easy-to-aim full damage rockets, and that's kinda it. Not necessarily overpowered, and not usually better than stock, but just kinda annoying and not very interesting. So the TF2 team said, alright, let's change that 25% clip size penalty to a 25% damage penalty, and then it'll be all good. But it became basically useless, because that projectile's fast, but it's only gonna do like 2 damage. But a couple months later, they decided to make it so the Liberty Launcher deals reduced self-damage, and then the gunmetal update increased its clip size from 4 to 5. So its clip size went from minus 25% to plus 25%. Going from a weapon with just 2 stats that didn't really offer any significant change to the soldier's playstyle to one with 3 pretty good upsides and 1 major downside. It gives you a little bit extra accuracy with those faster shots, you get an extra shot, and a little bit more mobility. But it still does like 2 damage. And, okay, this is the part where I'm gonna point out that, the Panic Attack really could be, or maybe even should be, the pick for any class that can equip it, since it basically shares 0 stats in common with its original version. But, I didn't want to put it on here 4 times. So let's just say the Panic Attack gets its own special spot. Right there, that's its spot. The Power Jack is pretty solidly Pyro's most overall useful melee weapon, especially since the Extinguisher was, well, we all know what happened to the Extinguisher. But what makes the current Power Jack so good is that it's a utility melee weapon on a class with very little need for actual melee damage. And what the Power Jack started out as is a weapon solely made for meleeing people, dealing 25% more damage than stock and healing 75 health on kill. And to balance it all out, no random crits. My guess is that they thought, hey, the fire axe is basically worthless, so let's give Pyro a super strong melee weapon with pretty much no downside. And while this version of the Power Jack was a super powerful melee weapon, it still had to compete with the pre-nerf Extinguisher. And with a very odd set of changes, the Hatless update in 2011 replaced the no random critical hit penalty on all melee weapons with a minus 25% damage penalty. So that meant that something like the Eyelander could now randomly crit, but it dealt less damage. The thing is, the next day, this was reverted on all weapons except for the Power Jack. The Power Jack lost its 25% damage bonus, but it could now randomly crit, and they added a new downside that you took 20% more melee damage when it was active. So all it was 75 health on kill, but if you're in a melee duel, you'll take more damage from enemy melee weapons. Not that big of a deal. But when 2013 saw the removal of item set bonuses, each set had a weapon that got changed to be somehow reminiscent of the bonus that equipping the whole set offered. The Gas Jockey set increased Pyro's movement speed by 10%. The Power Jack was then changed to increase Pyro's movement speed by 15%, but only when active, and the 20% melee vulnerability now applied to all damage taken. Later, that 75 health on kill was dropped to 25, and the health on kill could no longer overheal. Which was actually something that was never in any official patch notes, but after the Tough Break update, most health on kill weapons couldn't overheal anymore. So the Power Jack went from one of the best melee weapons for actually fighting people with to one of the best for utility use. The only thing it shares with its original version is the health on kill, and honestly, the current Power Jack doesn't usually make much use of it. The Persian Persuader is a very weird example where it underwent a pretty major rework, but I don't think there's anything that wrong with its pre-rework version or its current version. Both of them are/were good, fairly well-balanced weapons. The original version of the Persian Persuader, maybe not. When it came out, the Persian Persuader still allowed Demo Man to gain ammo from dispensers and payload cards. Something fairly minor, it was probably just an oversight. But what was definitely more of a problem was the amount of health restored from weapon pickups. Now this is back when weapons used to count as ammo. I don't remember exactly how much picking up a weapon healed offhand, but I'm pretty sure it was more than 100. Making it so that when you killed someone and picked up their weapon, you were usually at or close to full health. Making the half Zatoichi kinda pointless. And that 100% faster charge recharge would give you another charge every 6 seconds. So the amount of health gained from weapons was dropped, and then several years later, for whatever reason, they decided to change the whole thing. They removed both upsides and added melee hits restore 20% of your charge, and added ammo boxes collected give you charge. This came with the new downsides of minus 80% primary and secondary ammo. And just like all swords, it now holsters and deploys slower, but that's usually not a very big deal for the Persuader because you usually won't have any other weapons to switch to. Even though its stats are almost entirely different, I guess the current Persian Persuader still plays pretty similarly to the previous version. It heavily discourages using your explosive weapons, and it's going to allow you to charge a whole lot more often, but it's all done in a pretty different way. Aside from the panic attack, most of Heavy's weapons serve roughly the same general purpose now as they did when they were released. But despite having its original 2 stats that it had when it came out mostly intact, the Eviction Notice's role has changed quite a bit. And that's because they just kept adding on to the weapon. Kind of like the Liberty Launcher, it was just one of those 2 stat plus something minus another kind of deal. With the Eviction Notice being super fast punches, but super low damage, meaning it relied pretty much entirely on random crits to outdamage the stock fists. But then they made it so that you gain a speed boost on hit, which is a fun upside and allowed you to keep up enemies while you were punching them in the face. But a couple months after that, they decided to pull a Power Jack and have it increase your movement speed by 15% when active, but make you take 20% more damage. They also decided to lower the firing speed bonus from 50% faster to 40% faster. This wasn't in the patch notes. I'm not really sure why they did it, but they did. This all changed the Eviction Notice from one of those sorta goof around melee weapons to something that actually offered a utility use. It doesn't offer as much speed as the gloves of running urgently do, but its penalty isn't as high either. Then just like the gloves, the downside was changed in the Jungle Inferno update to reduce your max health when active, but only at a rate of 5 per second compared to the gloves 10. The Eviction Notice went from a weapon that wasn't even very good at its original purpose of punching people to a semi-useful stand-in for the gloves of running urgently if you don't feel like equipping the gloves of running urgently. What's this? Another weapon from 2011 that started with just 2 stats? It's like a theme here. The basic gimmick of the Reek Effects remains pretty similar to its original version, but its abilities have been expanded quite a bit, and its downsides have been changed multiple times. The inability to carry buildings was removed, and the ability to teleport to your teleporter's exit was added. Alright, neat, that's a cool upside. But now you upgrade and repair your buildings 50% slower. And I'm not joking when I say that this version of the Reek Effects may have been the worst weapon to ever exist in this game. It was absolutely terrible. But they came to their senses and removed those downsides and replaced them with a slower construction boost and 50% less metal from pickups and dispensers. Better, but still not great. The metal penalty was later dropped to 20%, and the cost of building and upgrading your teleporters was cut in half. And this was the same update that drastically reduced the base cost of teleporters to just 50, so now it's only 25. And also at some point they made it so you actually have to touch the resupply cabinet when you teleport back, when before it would just refill you on everything the second you got into spawn. So again, the basic playstyle of the Reek Effect isn't dramatically different. You build your teleporter, you wrench taunt back to spawn, and then you teleport back. But now it does a lot more things, making it more versatile and more interesting. It's helpful for your teammates because you can upgrade your teleporter a whole lot quicker. You don't have to destroy your buildings if you want to move them, and now you can have your teleporter exit placed anywhere, and you can teleport to it from anywhere. All it took was being completely awful for a couple years. Medic is another class that doesn't have very many weapons well, yeah, he doesn't have very many weapons, but he doesn't have very many that have gone through major reworks. They're all pretty much the same basic concept now as they were when they came out. But if I had to pick one, I guess I would go with the Vita-Saw. It still has the same retained Uber on death gimmick, but now you actually have to go out and get it by hitting people when before it was just a passive ability. And yeah, that does kind of change how it's used to some degree. Before, you could never take out the Vita-Saw your entire life, but you'd still have some Uber when you died. Assuming you died with above 0%. But nowadays, if you don't make use of it, you're just gonna have minus 10 health with no benefit. The Darwin's Danger Shield started with just one stat, plus 25 health on wear, and that's it. It lets you take some extra damage at the cost of your SMG. Not terrible, but not great. Then, like the Power Jack, this weapon was updated to include stats similar in function to the set bonus offered by Sniper's Polycount pack. The thing is, Sniper's set bonus allowed him to survive headshots. The only way to get this bonus before required using the Sydney Sleeper, so obviously you can't get headshots either. So what they did was they added 15% bullet resistance and a 20% explosive vulnerability on wearer to the Danger Shield, which allowed Sniper to survive quickscope headshots when at full health at the cost of taking some extra damage from explosives. A somewhat clever way to bring the Croco style set bonus over to another weapon, but in practice it just ends up being not fun. With Sniper's only real ranged counter being other snipers, it probably wasn't such a good idea to give him an anti-sniper weapon. So they ended up just scrapping the whole thing and made the Danger Shield an anti-pyro weapon, removing all of its previous stats and adding immunity to afterburn and 50% fire damage reduction. Going from an all-around standard plus health weapon to a weapon made for countering the long-range class to a weapon made for aiding survivability against the close-range class. Why though? I'm not really sure. To aid melee fights with pyros, that doesn't sound like a very good idea. Even if you wanted to make it an anti-pyro weapon, I don't think the health bonus needs to be removed, but okay, whatever. That's not what this video is about. Moving on. Another weapon from 2011 that started with 2 stats. X surprised everybody. I also put the Enforcer as my pick for Spy's most nerfed weapon in a video I did earlier this year. But after the recent Dead Ringer nerf, I think that would probably be the current choice for most nerfed. But that's also not what this video is about. The Enforcer started as a weapon that kind of more so encouraged a more aggressive playstyle. You had a very powerful revolver, but it might be hard to escape because you cloak slower. Except for with the Dead Ringer, because that cloaks instantly. So you had an overpowered revolver that paired super well with an overpowered watch. Of course, they ended up changing the downside and added no random critical hits, and also made it so the damage bonus only applied when undisguised. A downgrade for sure, but still the same basic concept. It does more damage. Then they changed it to make it so the damage bonus only applies for the one shot that you're actually disguised. And then later on they added a piercing gimmick for some reason. You have a weapon that went from a near upgrade that didn't really require strategy or even particularly good aim, to a gimmicky side grade that does require some strategy and does require some aim if you want to get the damage bonus. You just gotta hit the first shot. And also sometimes it does full damage to targets with bullet resistance, but only when it feels like it, because that gimmick barely works. And there it is, the most changed weapons. At least by my estimations. If I had to put some kind of order on it, I'd probably say something like this. Yeah, that's about right. There's always the chance that this will be outdated soon, especially since the last update they've overhauled quite a few weapons. More than they've really done in the past, but we shall see. But hey, if you're not subscribed, you could change that by clicking that old subscribe button. And if you are subscribed, don't change it, unless you really want to. Fine, go. I don't want you anyway. Yeah, you better run. No, come back. Well, I'm fading out. That means this is over. Click on another video, or don't. Whatever. It's all cool. Bye.